I'm Alan Holmes. I've been surveying the dragonflies at Moorgreen Lakes since 2018 on the River Blackwater. We've got records of dragonflies on this river going back to the 1980s. And what you see is we've lost two species, the moorland hawker and the black darter, simply through climate change. And we're also seeing new species coming in. Just in the past 5 years, we've had willow emerald damselfly coming in. That wasn't even in the country 30 years ago. Lesser emperor, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if you said you'd seen a lesser emperor dragonfly in this area, people would have been very suspicious. Now they're, well, you can go up to the height, 100 metres up there, and for a short period in summer, they are more or less guaranteed. It's amazing. Everything is moving north. The average damselfly is moving north about 2 kilometres a year. Maybe the true dragonflies are moving north a little bit faster. But climate change itself is moving much faster north than that. There are estimates of over 5 up to 15 kilometres a year across Europe. And so there is a debt being built up. The water temperature does not increase quite as fast as the air temperature, but what is happening is as temperatures rise, you're getting reduced oxygen in the water, and that is affecting the larvae. It's slightly masked by water movement, but there are these subtle effects. There are also effects on the prey species as well. And you see it not just with dragonflies. There's been a lot of work on river flies, which is really what the fish are eating, and a lot of concern that they are being affected, and particularly by high summer temperatures. And what's interesting is that the British climate is increasing at 0.26 degrees a decade, but actually our summer heat waves are actually increasing faster than that at 0.4 or something degrees a decade. So when we feel it really hot in summer, these things which are already stressed are really, really suffering. That actually the British climate is actually getting slightly wetter. But this rain is falling in the winter. We're getting slightly wetter winters, but in the summer we are getting more and more droughts and more severe droughts. And the modelling is that the very severe drought we had back in 1995, that has now got a double chance of being repeated, with all the pressure, the direct pressure of simply the lack of water, and also human extraction of water for human purposes. The Environment Agency are reckoning things like 20% of water bodies going to be affected by over-extraction. Okay. The most common one is the banded demoiselle, which is a small dark blue, iridescent blue thing with striking bands on the wing, and you'll see them from mid-May through to to something like end of August. In peak season, when you get a bit of heat and a bit of sun, the males are out displaying over the water weeds, waiting for the girls to turn up, and it's a magical, charismatic sight. So they will spend in May, June, July, the females will lay eggs, which will develop over the winter. So this here is one of the places where you will be getting banded demoiselles on the river. The sunny glade, open to the sky, but sheltered, and with waterweed on the surface. It's died back a bit now. This here is quite interesting feature on the Blackwater, because we've had some crack willow which has fallen in and is blocking or damming the river. And to a certain extent, actually, this is great because it will provide nursery habitat for fish. It will also, to some extent, smooth out any flash flood. And you also are creating more of a diversity of habitat with little mosaics of different habitat.
And if there were dragonfly grubs in there, would they be affected by the speed of the water? Do they need it particularly still, or?
Different dragonflies, different damselflies like different conditions. Some are very much still water species, pond species, lake species. Others are solely flowing water species. Of course, sometimes they don't know these rules and you'll find them in the wrong place, but come on, they need to read the books. Um, but it's but certainly your demoiselles are classically on the river, on streams that are flowing. We do sometimes get them actually on the lake at Mill Green Lakes, and I'm sort of assuming that they're sitting there keeping up, maturing before they're coming back to the river. But it's not impossible that they do breed there, but I've never seen it, never proven it. Different species take different lengths of time, but probably the banded demoiselle is taking a year to mature, and so it will emerge the following May, June, and the cycle repeats itself. It will then spend a few weeks away from the river, fattening up on aphids and that sort of thing, and then it'll come back to the river basically to breed. Their lifetime as an adult is only a few weeks, I'm afraid. It may be 4 or 6 weeks, something in that sort of order. The importance of going to all this effort of emerging and coming out is a dispersive phase that can fly away and find other water bodies. It can fly upstream. The genes get a bit more mixed. You can respond to environmental stresses like increasing temperature, like they're moving north, for example. Different species are responding differently. I mean, the southern hawker, which is that big thing that's coming out of your garden pond, I mean, that is actually moving north at, I think it's almost 20 kilometres a year. It's amazing. It has been seen on Orkney for the first time this year. Actually, the problem is not so much the dispersion, it's not so much their ability to fly, and true dragonflies are strong flyers. The problem is finding receiving habitat. But I mean, we're getting true dragonflies coming in from France now, and we see that it is from France that they're coming in. When you go along the south coast, you see records of things that are sort of, we wouldn't normally get there. What's the risks of being a damselfly larvae in the river? The big one is being eaten. It's everything in the river wants to eat you. You want to eat other things smaller than you, fish and that sort of thing want to eat you, and it's a numbers game. There have been concerns in this area for invasive crayfish. I'm not so sure that that's actually such a big problem for specifically on the Blackwater. One season, we had a big flash flood after rain. The path was flooded for a few days, and I came down and I saw that the vegetation had been scoured all the way along the bank, and you see it over there on the far side. There is no vegetation the bottom half metre, because that's just been ripped out by flooding. All my dragonflies, my demoiselle damselflies, were all gone that season, and I thought, well, that's the explanation. The larvae have just been washed out. And somebody said, Alan, was it that, or was it something in the water? And that's what got me interested in the water chemistry and what's actually in the river. Well, there are specific problems to the Blackwater. We are just downstream of Sandhurst sewage works, but further up from that, you get quite a major conurbation, and in particular, much bigger sewage works like Aldershot. So you've got quite a lot of hopefully treated sewage coming down the river, and actually, when you look at it, it is a very big proportion of the actual water in the river. So what humans are producing has a very significant effect on the ecosystem. And of course, in summer, when there is less, in a drought, when there is less natural water, as it were, what's coming out of the sewage works is that bit more concentrated. But the other side of it is when you get a flash flood, as you often get at the end of a drought, so suddenly you can get a storm flow coming through, and you get untreated sewage coming through, and also you also get scour events. If you look at the habitat, in the end, once you've built a housing estate, an industrial estate, a new town, that's not coming back. That's a ratchet. That's gone. You are getting increased pressures. We're simply getting more people, and therefore we're getting more physically more effluent coming through. You're just getting more stress, basically, fundamentally. You're getting new chemicals coming in, all these forever chemicals, you know. In the olden days, in the sort of 80s, 90s, we thought the biggest concerns in the river were things like nutrients, things like phosphate and nitrogen. And as a result, there was a big campaign to get phosphate out of rivers, and that was done partly by controls on use of phosphate fertilizer, and it was partly done by scrubbing out the phosphate in the sewage works. And the result is that phosphate levels in the river really have dropped since the 90s. They were up at 10, 15 parts per million back then. Now it's in the order of 1 or even less. It can still be a problem in some areas from all sorts of things as diverse as Canada geese, if you've got lots of them, or chicken farms, all these sorts of things. But typically it's not, it doesn't, from the limited testing we've done so far as the group, it doesn't seem to be the big problem. Nitrogen, similarly, it's up and down, but it was up and down before, and it seems to be sort of about the same. So I don't think nutrients themselves are a particular problem. There's been various metals that have got into the river in the past, boron, for example, that sort of thing. And they seem to be sort of under control. There's a bit of concern about runoff from scrap metal works, from old industrial sites, but that's an unknown. Ironically, one of the things that has increased has been iron in the river, but that is because we're using iron to precipitate out the nutrients. And actually, in this area, we're on the bagshot sands, and so the groundwater is iron rich and is acidic. And actually, what the river is doing, and what Moor Green Lakes itself is doing, is buffering out the springs of iron-rich acid water before it goes down further. The river looks lovely and clear, yeah, but actually appearances can be deceptive. All these chemicals are invisible, and that is actually the problem. There are other things in the river, and what's interesting is we're not, and they're really quite unknowns actually. And one of the big unknowns, for example, is E. coli. E. coli is not really an ecological problem, but if you want to swim in this river, and there are families who come down and want to swim in the river in the summer in the school holidays, we don't actually test for E. coli in the river. There's upstream at Horseshoe Lakes. There is you can go wild swimming, but we do not seem to be testing for E. coli. Also, really not known is these forever chemicals. Riverfly Partnership reckon that there is something like 200 forever chemicals that they've got to check for on a river, and all sorts of chemicals coming out of industrial processes. And the big ones that are of biggest concern at the moment are now pesticides. There's been all this story about neonics being used in agriculture on quite flimsy grounds, quite frankly, on a so-called emergency use, which has turned out to be constant. And these are known to have very serious effects on insects, like, for example, bumblebees and other pollinators. So neonics are really a very big concern. There's a government attempt to greatly restrict the so-called emergency use of neonics, which is positive. But actually, when they banned neonics for or a lot of neonics for agricultural use, they discovered that they were using 4,000 tons at that point. They turned around to discover that the 2,500 tonnes was actually being used for pet insecticides, for all your treatments that your vet is giving you for fleas and ticks. And there was quite a big push, really based on the commercial drivers among veterinary practices, to sign people up for treatments, and that were monthly treatments. But if you think about it, it doesn't make sense. That's a little bit like saying, I will use fly spray in the house even when there's no flies. It does not make sense. And there are now 3 veterinary bodies, for example, the British Veterinary Association, who are saying you should only be using these insecticides if your dog actually has the fleas or the ticks. Most dogs do not have ticks. And by the way, there's also other things you can do about fleas, like vacuum clean your carpets frequently. That's probably more important. But then you see, it's not just the vets. You can go into your supermarket and you can buy these products, or something very similar to these products. Maybe not quite as strong, but it's still the same stuff. I think one of the things that's worth saying about these insecticides is, firstly, they're broad spectrum. That's how they're able to treat both fleas and ticks. And if you think about it, a tick is not even an insect. And they're also exactly the same active ingredient is used to treat mites in chicken. You know, it's a very broad spectrum. So when it gets into the river, it gets everything. Now, what is interesting is that going back a little bit to my dragonfly surveying, I'm actually seeing the impact of this treatment coming in. 25 years ago, when Ken surveyed on this river, he was getting, on average, a peak of 100 blue-tailed damselflies a year. So his peak every year, on average, was 100. In the time I've been surveying, in the past 8 years, I've never seen more than 25. So my peak is a quarter of his average. And the blue-tailed damselfly is known to be particularly sensitive to fipronil, which is the main active ingredient in some of these spot-on treatments. So we actually see a very specific causal chain between the overuse of the product and the decline in a specific species. To the extent that what was one of our common damselflies, and actually is the commonest across a lot of Western Europe until this problem came up, is now seen as a bit of an indicator species. There was work done last year on the larvae of various species of insect in general, and the blue-tailed damselfly came out as one of the most affected species. And then to corroborate that, records of the presence of blue-tailed damselfly was compared with Environment Agency testing results across the East Anglia. And you could see a very significant effect. So the blue-tailed damselfly is the canary, and it looks as though the canary is keeling over in southern England. Seems to be a fairly clear causal link between the rise of these new insecticides and the overuse of them and the decline of the species. And this is a species that was originally thought to be quite insensitive to general pollution a generation ago. The obvious thing to do was to test the water. And I therefore joined this group, BVAR, Blackwater Valley Action for Rivers, testing the water every month. And we come down here, or I come down here every month and go just a couple of 100 metres down there to the bridge and test the water there for pH, conductivity, for nitrogen, phosphate, and a couple of other things. And We've been doing that now for about 4 or 5 months. The other thing that we're doing is also monitoring the river flies, so the caddisflies, stoneflies, and mayflies, and trying to get an estimate of larvae in the river. And that is an interesting test because it doesn't tell you specifically what the problem is, but it picks up problems with chemicals. For example, if there was a sudden discharge of something that was completely unexpected, something completely novel, like a pollution incident upstream. And then you can start working out more closely what actually is it, firstly, where it is physically, and then you can start testing the water for more exotic chemicals. And this is where I test the river with BVAR every month, at the last weekend of the month. And I do it here simply because the great thing is in 20 years' time, the bridge is not going to have moved and people will know where it is.
For people all around the world, they'd see a wood and think, well, this is pristine, protected wildlife. But in Britain, this is like, in some ways like a municipal park, isn't it? This is an important part of...
There is nothing in southern England that is pristine, is natural, except by the will and hand of man. This has been allowed to develop, and after being gravel pits, there was a planning process, and you had Moor Green, you had a nature reserve on 2 of the lakes, you have a jet ski lake, you've got angling lakes, you have got a wild swimming and more a country park type area on Horseshoe. You have got a patchwork of different uses and quite heavy human uses of this area. So yes, we've got nature, but somehow we're trying to integrate a heavy human use for all the leisure services and ecological services it provides, like the dog walking, like the running, like walking in nature. I think the great thing about this is that there's a community of like-minded people who are trying to save the river and look after the river and all the wonderful ecosystem resources it provides to the local population, and so we've got something we can hand over in good condition to our children. The current funding that we have is for 12 months, but I don't see this as something that we will stop after 12 months. I would like to think that we are carrying this on, and possibly be a bit more focused and on where we see a particular need. But I think we have to do more than the baseline. We have to carry on. The looking after our river is not just a one-off thing. It's a responsibility for us as individuals and as a society for all time. We all realise that treating water as a resource that can be sold is not really working. We have to accept it as a common good and look after it as such. Otherwise, we will not have anything for ourselves, and we'll not have anything for our children, and we'll not have anything to come and run along beside, to bring our dogs and walk along beside, to just enjoy. It's a common good, and we've all got to look after it. Well, firstly, I would like them, if they're dog owners, only to use insecticides on an as-needed basis. Not to not use them, but only to use them when they've actually got a problem. And certainly it's now October, so the tick season is over, for example. And if they do have to use insecticides, don't let their dogs into the river for 28 days. But in general, there are all sorts of things they can do. Like they can join all sorts of wonderful volunteers, either, for example, in Moor Green Nature Reserve with the work parties and be a member. They can come down and simply enjoy the river. They can record the wildlife. They can go bird watching. They can just run along it. They can just enjoy it. They can enthuse to their counsellors, and they can make it clear to their council that this is important to them.